Welding and cutting. It's an intense scene. Sparks flying. Flames searing through metal. Extreme heat. There are a lot of different ways a mechanical construction or service worker can get hurt on a job site, and it should come as no big surprise that some of the most serious accidents occur when we're welding or cutting.
The mix of powerful electric current, highly flammable gases, and molten metal are a real recipe for trouble. That's why in our business we have to stay so focused on safety. So let's take a closer look at some of the more common hazards you face while welding or cutting and how you can protect yourself.
We'll look at 3 areas: general hazards, personal protective equipment, and specific safety measures. So what are the general hazards we face? When you're electric arc welding, electrocution, or at a minimum, severe burns caused by electric shock are big concerns.
Electric current is measured in amps and milliamps. A milliamp is a tiny fraction of 1 amp, 1/1000th. It only takes around 70 to 100 milliamps to kill a person, and welding units typically operate with a current of 10 to 600 amps. I think you get the picture.
Another hazard of welding and cutting is eye damage, such as welder's flash, caused by ultraviolet radiation from the welding arc or cutting flame. We also have to be concerned about infrared radiation and visible glare, as well as sparks, slag, and other flying particles. Of course, you're typically dealing with metal that's heated to over 1,000 degrees, so you can get some nasty, painful burns caused by sparks, slag, or the hot workpiece itself. Welding and cutting may also release hazardous airborne substances like lead, zinc, and manganese. Under the right conditions, these can accumulate in your body and make you pretty sick. Last but not certainly least is the danger of fires and explosions.
Why do I include fires and explosions in the same category? Because an explosion is nothing more than rapidly accelerated burning.
Obviously, you don't want any part of these hazards. So, what do? You can start with your personal protective equipment. Wear leather steel-toe boots with high tops that fit tightly around your ankles and long pants with no cuffs. That way, you minimize the risk of getting burned by a hot spark or a flying piece of slag getting trapped in your clothing. Many mechanical workers wear flame-resistant leggings or complete coveralls as extra protection from sparks and slag. Always wear long-sleeve shirts without pockets or cuffs for the same reason. And don't forget to check the fabric.
Synthetics like polyester melt and burn really easily, so make sure you don't wear anything to the job site that's made out of polyester or any other flammable material. Wear natural materials like cotton or wool.
And of course, heavy-duty welding gloves protect your hands from burns. Now let's take a look at your eye protection. You can use different shades of filter plates or lenses according to the type of welding or cutting you'll be doing. The key is to make sure you have on the right eye protection before you look at an arc or flame, even for an instant. The type of shade you use for electric arc welding depends on the size of the electrode and the amount of electrical current being generated. And if you're cutting with oxyacetylene, always use protective goggles with a number 5 shaded lens. Remember, if you're not sure what to wear, check with your supervisor before you start. You should also be sure to use safety glasses with side shields or safety goggles under your helmet to protect against sparks and slag.
It's especially hazardous when you're working in damp or wet areas. Tiny fragments of molten metal can shoot through the air if they come in contact with moisture. And another thing, a lot of us like having a hard hat on all the time, even when we're welding. In fact, hard hats are required 100% of the time on most job sites these days. With this rig, the face and eye shield built right into the hard hat. Makes it pretty easy to stay protected.
Now you're wearing the right clothes, you have the right eye protection, and your hard hat is on. Your PPE is up to code.
So, what else do you have to look out for? Plenty. Here's some measures you can take to protect yourself.
The biggest hazard in electric arc welding isn't from the heat, the sparks, the fumes, or the intense infrared radiation. The biggest hazard is electrocution.
Protect yourself by making sure that you are never a part of the electrical circuit, that you never become electricity's easiest path to ground.
Electricity flows from the power source through a wire to the tool or unit that uses the power and returns through another wire to the power source. If you somehow become a part of that circuit by touching an energized wire or part of an energized electrode holder that's not insulated, you'll get shocked. How severe the shock is depends on how much current actually passes through your body on its way to ground.
So, always make sure that your welding unit is grounded and that the work itself is grounded. But also be sure to keep yourself insulated from the circuit. It just makes sense that the less chance you have of touching conductive materials, the safer you'll be.
So make sure the electrode holders and welding cables are well insulated. Check that the stinger leads are in good condition and avoid changing electrodes with your bare hands. Protect the insulation on your cables by arranging them so that sparks and slag won't land on them and melt parts of the insulation. That's how cables usually get damaged.
Also, water is a great conductor of electricity. That means you should always avoid electric arc welding in damp or wet environments without added insulation.
When you have to work in a damp or wet environment, make sure that you use welding mats as added protection against becoming the easiest path to ground.
Now let's talk about ways you can deal with respiratory hazards.
Metals that are heated up to the point where they can be cut or welded also give off fumes. Metal fumes like those from lead, zinc, or manganese can cause health problems in workers who inhale too much of them. The key is to make sure that your work area is always well ventilated. Talk to your supervisor about whether the ventilation in your work area is adequate for the type of work you're going to be doing and whether special respiratory protection is needed to keep you safe.
When you're working around hot metals, there's always the danger of sparks or hot slag landing in a pile of sawdust or rags. Pretty soon the sawdust is smoldering, and if the conditions are right, it can turn into a full-fledged fire. Keep your work area clean. Make sure your space is free and clear of any combustible materials like paper and trash, oily rags and grease. Don't hesitate to grab a broom and clear yourself some room to work. And keep at least one Class ABC fire extinguisher nearby. Never know when it might come in handy.
Fires often smolder for a while until they burst into flame. Make sure there's nothing smoldering in your work area.
There are a number of things you can do to protect yourself against the chance of an explosion. First off, double check the ventilation in your work area.
If you can minimize any gas buildup near the heat and sparks of your cutting or welding work, you can also minimize the chance of an explosion. Inspect all cylinders, hoses, valves, and torches before using them. Make sure that any defective parts get repaired or replaced right away. And make sure your torch or regulator is equipped with a flashback arrestor. Flashback is an explosion caused by gases burning back inside the torch or hoses. A flashback arrestor will prevent these explosions.
Always transport, use, and store gas cylinders safely secured in an upright position. And keep them well clear of ignition sources like sparks and flames. Also, store oxygen and other fuel gas cylinders like acetylene separately, at least 20 feet apart, or with at least a half-hour rated non-combustible barrier between them. Here are some other important safety measures to keep in mind.
Don't store or use cylinders in heat above 125 degrees and never take them into confined spaces. Only use friction lighters to light a torch. Leave the wrench on the stem of the gas cylinder when you're using it so it can be turned off quickly in an emergency. As soon as you finish using the cylinders, turn off the gases, bleed the lines, remove the regulator, and replace the cylinder caps.
Replacing the caps and keeping the cylinder secured in an upright position helps prevent against explosions, but it's pretty important for another reason too. If a cylinder were to fall over and break the valve or regulator, the pressure from the expelled gas could be enough to propel the cylinder across the work area like an unguided missile. Welding and cutting can be dangerous, but you can prevent problems if you stay focused on safety.
Use your personal protective equipment. Ground the welding unit and the work and keep yourself insulated from the path of the current. Also, use welding mats in damp or wet environments. Make sure your work area is well ventilated and always check to see whether respiratory protection is needed. Keep your work area clear of trash, sawdust, and other combustibles, and keep a Class ABC fire extinguisher close at hand. Store and use gas cylinders safely and properly.
And use your head. Stay alert for potential dangers, and you'll be a healthy member of the mechanical construction trades for a long time to come.